All right. Would you like to cover some metaphysical ground?
Sure. Always happy to cover metaphysical
All
ground.
right. Well, one of the topics that I'm covering here on the channel, and I've got one video out on it, but I've got some others that I'm editing that are coming out,
Yeah.
is on the philosophy of orcishness. Now,
Hmm.
that can definitely be a very geeky topic right there.
Yeah.
But I would say so in Aetaltis, is there objective evil?
Hmm.
Are there orcs? How are you handling that? What's the relationship between the characters and objective evil, if there is such thing, or is
Yeah.
there nothing like that?
No, so that's something that was really important to me to look at because I think that most folks watching will probably be aware of some of the concerns around like the orcs and things like that, representing being basically racial parodies and having some pretty harmful ideas behind them. One of the things that I wanted, however, is I do like this idea in our own world. It's never cut and dried what's right and wrong, right? It's very hard sometimes to really, I shouldn't say never, but it can be complicated. Even if you know what's right and wrong, the motivations behind it can make it complicated. At the game table, it's nice to have some clarity. And I think that it's important to have a clear foe that you're out to fight. It's kind of like in Space Invaders, the aliens coming down, you don't really think much about, if anyone knows what Space Invaders is. I've just aged myself, but the reality is that in a video game, you've got enemies that you're fighting and you don't spend a lot of time thinking about what's motivating the enemy. It's an escape. And so I wanted to have that in this world. And so there are orcs, goblins, trolls, and they are evil. But what's important, and this is where I talk about reimagining how things work, the important part is that there is a dark god named Androran who wanted to take his vengeance upon his brothers and sisters who cast him out. He gave magic to the people of the world, and they were not amused, and so they cast him out. And so to create his revenge, he wanted to create something evil to wreck everything that they built. Because he embraced the dark powers, he embraced the evil, let his anger get the best of him, and was like, yeah, I want to make something. But unfortunately, he couldn't make these things themselves. He couldn't make true life. But what he could do is create parodies of life. And orcs, for example, are a dark mirror of dwarves. They're the worst aspects of dwarves brought to life.
That's right. I remember that they're the mirror of dwarves, not elves.
They are, right?
Yes,
And exactly.
I thought that was interesting. Yes.
Yeah, and for example, goblins are the dark version of halflings. They don't even really build their own cultures. Their cultures are parodies of the cultures that were built by these different lineages during the early days of the world. And so what you have are these creatures that are designed for one reason only, and that's destruction. They aren't beautiful creatures. They don't have the potential to change. They are, unfortunately, just living weapons, effectively. However, you also have creatures like kobolds and gnolls, which are half human, half animal. These creatures were created when the cataclysm destroyed the gates. Humans and a number of the different lineages are from a different world. They came through to Aetaltis and were trapped there when their gates were destroyed, but it melded creatures together. And you ended up with things like minotaurs and goblins. I mean, minotaurs and kobolds and gnolls. These creatures aren't necessarily evil. These creatures are creatures that are often cast out. They often live on the edges of society. They're often treated badly because people don't have a high opinion of them. And at times people find them to be repulsive by their own definitions of beauty. And so they may behave in ways that are unpleasant and dark, but they aren't necessarily dark in and of themselves. And so that gives you a space to have that moral grayness on which way you want to go. And then in between, you've got opportunities for people to make dark choices, to lead themselves down the path of darkness to the point where it consumes them and they cease to exist and become that dark mirror of themselves. You've got all these sort of shades in between, but I wanted to have a very clear sense of, well, we know it's okay to fight these folks. Mm-hmm. We know that if we don't fight them, it will mean the end of life as we know it. They're just like a storm or a disease or something like that. At some point, you have to destroy them. And they represent mirrors of the other lineages. So they aren't like their own lineage that, has been demonized along the way.
I think that is, of course, there are multiple different types of storytelling. Yeah. But I think that's a completely valid type of storytelling, because what I do is I recognize different types of stories that are
Yeah.
going on, and in storytelling of a certain type of that, like, I have no problem with that. Other people on the internet obviously have different opinions, but I don't have any problem with that as a certain type of storytelling, because I've made the argument in others before that, like, yeah, they're like, if your PCs all of a sudden look over the ravine or something like that, and they see some elves all of a sudden being beaten up by orcs.
Hmm.
Like, now is not the time for a major discussion among the PCs about what is right or what is wrong or what. It's just, that's the game master telling you, go fight the orcs. You had some good guys, you had some bad guys. Go jump in and be a hero and help. Fight the orcs, help the elves.
Yeah. But I think that one of the challenges, though, is that there was the use of some of these monster species as a way to sort of represent sideways, whether or not it was even fully cognizant. It was a sideways representation, especially when all of the other heroes in the world were clearly white people, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
truth is that you have to think about it, whether or not you believe that having a villain as a storytelling foil is okay, a bad person who you can only defeat. The reality is that we do have a responsibility to think about how we're including them within the world, which is why we spent a lot of time saying, how do we include this while making sure that we're not just repeating the same mistakes over again? I believe that we've been successful in what we've done, but that's going to be up to other folks to tell us. And I think that we have a responsibility to, think through those sorts of decisions, because as much as I love the idea of like, yeah, I'm going to go kill some orcs, I need to think about, what those orcs represent in my world.
Yeah, yeah, because they could. Well, right. We've been talking about like the representation of the demonic
Yeah.
versus the representation of some type of uh, aspect of humanity,
Yeah.
and those are very different things.
And what I wanted is I wanted this to be a fight against the dark parts of themselves. We all have to face the parts of ourselves we don't like, the parts of ourselves that are greedy or angry or violent or well up inside of us. Every human being has to deal with that. And that's what I wanted the orcs and the goblins and the trolls to be, is I wanted them to be that when a dwarf faces off with an orc, the dwarf is facing off with the darkest aspects of themselves, and they are overcoming it in a physical conflict. And that's the sort of idea that I wanted to create.
Well, that sounds like wasn't that the George R. R. Martin? Was it George R. R. Martin who said this originally or not? I don't know, but I'm
Hmm.
connecting with him that the division between good and evil runs through every human heart.
Hmm.
I think that aspect is present in what he does. I think he said that, whether or not he was the originator of the idea or not.
Hmm.
But that's a different way to go.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with potential redemption of orcs or the potential fall of elves or
Hmm.
those things, that's a different type of storytelling.
Yeah.
You're going a different direction, and I personally, I think that when you're critiquing these things, which you are
Hmm.
rightly doing, sometimes people will critique them. You've got a particular type of storytelling, and then you're critiquing it according to a different type of storytelling. And you're crossing the genres, and you're like, okay, well, you're not supposed to be doing that. But in the context of this is what we're looking at. In the context of this is what we're looking at. And they should be evaluated in sort of their own context. Is kind of the way that I've
Yeah.
been thinking about going.
If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and all of that jazz. It really helps a lot. But also, please check out The Cultists, the web series on this channel about modern-day D&D playing Lovecraftian cultists who just want to worship Cthulhu in a world full of people who just don't understand. Season 1 is on the channel now. But also, please check out my YouTube channel. I have over 150 videos on tabletop games and the fantasy genre. If you've enjoyed this video, you might enjoy many of them as well. I look forward to seeing you for them and many more videos to come.